In last week's episode, we talked about fidget spinners. Let's see what you had to say. Drac116, who is an ADHD diagnosed adult, talks about their experience with fidget spinners and about how it's easy to see how they are a distraction, but also goes on to talk about a sort of additional possible future for fidget spinners that we didn't talk about, which is if they become really, really popular and then the popularity subsides, it doesn't necessarily mean that they become uncool. It just means that they become another feature of the landscape. And I think this is something that will confront again and again throughout the comment response, or at least a couple more times, that like, you know, what is it that's gonna stop these things from becoming just a tool that some people have at their disposal, and something that isn't a distraction, something that isn't a commodity, a product that advertises your taste, that, you know, shows sort of something about yourself besides the fact that you might need a tool in order to help you concentrate. I also just really want to thank Drac116 and everybody else who shared their experiences being people who were diagnosed with ADHD, who are on the spectrum with PTSD, and just, you know, sharing your experiences, talking about yourself, your relationship to fidget spinners, or the lack of one, as it may be. This is a really great, and I think really eye-opening comment thread. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I very much appreciate you, you know, sharing yourself with us and the community. Yeah, thanks. After speaking with some educators, Alice Powell talks about the realization that fidget spinners might address some problems with concentration in settings like classrooms, but that more than anything, they might be a quick fix instead of an actual solution, and that the conversation and popularity surrounding them sort of indicates the perennial problems that exist around a kind of one-size-fits-all idea about education, and that, you know, we might actually be looking at the fidget spinner as a symptom of larger challenges within a classroom setting, and that putting the onus on these objects is to ignore or in some way be distracted from, you know, the larger challenges and the larger problems within having to teach huge groups of students all at the same time, lots of people with lots of different needs. I think this is a really great point, and this inspired a really great conversation with lots of interesting back and forth. So yeah, recommended. On a related note, Lycheens talks about how the marketing for fidgeting objects shouldn't be mistaken for actual sound research showing that it has, you know, provable benefits. And I think that there's a lot to this, that you have a lot of people who will advocate for these things as, you know, a solve of some kind for people needing to concentrate and looking to other kinds of research to support their use in something like a classroom. But then you also have the testimony of teachers in classrooms saying that a lot of the people who have them are people who do not need them. And Lycheens talks about, you know, it's not necessarily the fact that they exist, but it is the fact that they are being, you know, broken, being traded, you know, being used atop a desk like it's a little performance. And that this is something that is, you know, an important part of this conversation, and that if students actually do need to use them, then there are individualized education plans or IEPs that could allow them to use a fidget spinner or tool or something like one, as long as they sort of go through the paces. I think that also comes with a lot of difficulty as far as, like Lycheens points out, you know, getting parents to go through the process that results in something like that. But yeah, I think, you know, the individualized education plan is something that came up a lot in the comments and is a great point. Similarly, MLPK is a 7th grade teacher who talks about having banned fidget spinners and feeling like it was a good decision for, you know, teacher reasons. So good comment, worth reading. Links to this one and all the others in the description. NoyzBot talks about an experience of using fidget objects that didn't even come up in the research, which is to distract from chronic pain, and that it is not necessarily an object that is useful for people who are neurodivergent in some way, but that if you suffer from chronic pain, it is a sort of physical activity that can allow you to concentrate by taking this sort of low-level concentration on that, you know, away and depositing it somewhere else, which is, yeah, something I didn't even consider. WimpyMcWeaksauce This is pretty close to the thought process that I went through. For people who watched our cell phone battery episode, I did that like pen flippy trick thing that I do, and that is something that I have been doing, for a very, very long time. And as soon as fidget spinners came out, I was like, what is this? I don't need this. But then I realized that I basically do something very similar with my pen, but that I don't always have a pen with me, and often my pen flipping will result in me throwing a pen a little bit accidentally, and there's never a threat that I will do that with a fidget spinner. I also want to say that I think pen flipping, though irritating in some respects, and depending upon your style of pen flip, is largely sort of given a pass. The fidget spinner has become, I think, perhaps because of its popularity, a bit of a pariah, and that it does have this weird a lot of weird associations with it. And I wonder the degree to which pen flipping has been given a pass is due to the fact that if you have a pen, it's sort of a suggestion that you're working, and that the pen as an object is indicative of mental activity, mental acuity, the intention to work even if you're not, whereas a fidget spinner is, a toy for idleness, to sort of give it its least charitable description. But yeah, this is a great comment. It made me think about, what by flipping a pen are you signifying versus fiddling with a fidget spinner, even if the outcome is essentially the same. Pterodactyl on the subreddit writes a really interesting comment about the differing uses of different fidget tools, and how each different kind can serve a different purpose. They talk a little bit about how they are used to sort of occupy some kind of passive energy that needs dissipating while trying to accomplish certain tasks, and that the differing kinds of passive energy are dissipated or focused by differing types of objects, which is a thing that we didn't even think about, which is really interesting that, these things are not just fidget toys as a whole, as a group, but that each one of them has perhaps a different purpose and probably even a different association or significance, which is, great point. And finally, there was a little bit of discussion on the subreddit about how this episode of Idea Channel about fidget spinners was a sort of classic example of overanalysis. They're not actually that deep. There's not a lot there. We're just making a lot out of nothing. There was something that Mortles wrote in response to that I've been thinking about ever since. And they said that it's the people, not the spinners, that we're curious about. And I just want to say that, this is maybe the distillation of what I like to think we at least try to do on Idea Channel, is that, we talk a lot about media and objects and popular experience and all this other stuff, but that really always what we're getting at is what these things have to say about the people who interact with them, the communities that form around these things, what they suggest about the context or the social sphere, whatever you want to call it, the society, the culture that they exist in, and that, on its face it looks like we're talking about objects, but we're talking about what relationship people and peoples have to those objects. And I think that's a way to, plumb the human experience for interest and meaning, try to understand where other people are coming from. So yeah, thanks, Mortals.